Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights.
Welcome back to Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. And we have a press conference with Premier John Horgan, and this could be one of his last ever as Premier, if not his last ever as Premier. As we know, he is stepping down from being Premier, and for personal and health reasons, that he thinks that he can serve the public better as something other than being Premier at this point in time. It speaks to how he actually sees serving the public and some of the things that he has tried to do to serve the public. And he's going to bring up in this the idea of improving across the province, even including in remote areas, the idea of improving paramedics and ambulance service, as well as fire services, to ensure that people in time of crisis can get help faster, easier, and more adequate service to them in their times of need. In some of the more remote areas, that you will find volunteer services, and sometimes the volunteer service may be a little slower to get to. It may be the person that actually shows up may not be as well trained, and in some cases they may be extremely well trained. But that's the whole thing, is he's trying to make it so that it becomes a level playing field where there is a standard, and he's trying to raise the standard to a better place. And he's talking about that, and he's also talking about other municipal things that need to be improved and how to improve them. He's also going to make some comments about how the decriminalization of drug possession should be approached, and what his thoughts are on that approach. He brings up the idea of a person possessing a substance with the intention of personal use versus the possession of the same substance with the intention of poisoning, or shall we say, selling the substance to others without due care or diligence. That by selling the drug, you could be poisoning someone. By selling the drug, you could be doing them harm, and that should be criminalized versus having the same substance and with no intention other than using it yourself. So there's a lot of things that he's going to say in the next few minutes, shall we say 30 minutes, that talks a lot about how he thought of his political career, and how he saw a lot of how the past years have gone with his term as premier to British Columbia. So let's listen to what John Horgan has to say and try to understand what our community actually needs as we prepare to select a new person as premier via the for those of you who are part of the NDP caucus and are looking to vote for the new leader of the NDP. And when we head into a more general election for selecting government for the premier, for the province itself.
So, greetings everyone. I have to tell you, the light's pretty bright. I can't see you, but I know you're there. So I'll just start by saying it is concluding yet another Union BC municipalities, and it was another opportunity for people from around the province to come together in person to talk about the challenges we're facing, all of us together, in communities large and small, from top to bottom, from coast to Rocky Mountains. And as much as UBCM is oftentimes a place of handing out of lolly in the past, what we've tried to do today is meet the needs of communities, not just during UBCM week, but every week of the year. And I think that's appreciated by those who have to make plans to address and deliver services in communities, rural and remote, large urban centers as well. So I hope that this will be a trend continuing for governments down the road, that we don't just think about working together 1 week of the year, but we're working together every day of the year. And with that, I'll ask Lindsay to take some questions.
Okay. We do, is this on? We're good. We have media on the phone line, so I will remind them, please, to press *1 to enter the queue. You're all limited to one question and one follow-up. We're going to start in the room. Richard Zussman, Global News.
One of the things I'm guessing you heard a little bit about from mayors and councillors was the healthcare system. One of the things specifically we're hearing about are ambulance wait times. We've heard some recent stories about people who've waited extended periods of time. What is the province doing to address these ambulance challenges, not just in urban areas, but rural areas as well? And what responsibility does the province have compared to that of Ottawa?
Oh, well, in this instance, the province and local governments and health authorities have responsibility. And what we've been doing over the past 5 years is modernizing the ambulance service, bringing more members on permanently rather than having them on call, particularly in rural and remote places where they were getting, in some cases, $2 an hour to wait for catastrophe. I remember being in Port Renfrew some years ago at a meeting. It was late at night, and the ambulance paramedic was at the meeting I was at, and as I was leaving, he said, if you're going to go off the road, do it before you get to Lost Creek or the call will go to Souk. I mean, he was joking, but the system wasn't working when we arrived, and we've tried to make amendments to address the concerns, particularly in rural and remote communities. But we are also working, and we'll have announcements to make in the short term about how we can collaborate with first responders, so that ambulance paramedics and firefighters, who many of the firefighters have the same level of training as paramedics, oftentimes get to site earlier than ambulances because of the number, quite frankly, of firefighters in communities around the province. And so we're looking at ways to find more collaboration. I think that will ease the strain in the short term, and in the long term, we need to build out the system further. We've started that back in 2017, and we'll continue to do that.
Richard, do you have a follow-up?
Both Elections BC and the BC NDP are now investigating issues around the leadership to replace you. Are you worried at all about the integrity of that vote and the process going in to find your replacement and the important job of Premier? And are you worried at all about some of the things that Anjali Appadurai is saying that could dismantle a lot of the work that you have done as Premier?
Well, I have seen public coverage through the media of investigations that are underway. I have not been briefed on the material that's been presented. I only know what I'm seeing on my TV and reading in my clippings. But I'm concerned, seriously concerned about the integrity of the process. But I know I've been a member of the NDP since 1983. I know we think very hard about these issues, and we put in place processes to protect the integrity of the system. And people are charged with that. There's an electoral officer within the process. There's the executive of the BC NDP. And I understand Elections BC is looking at it as well. So I have nothing more to say other than, yes, I am concerned about the allegations, but there are allegations and there are investigations underway.
Next question. Who's stepping up? Okay. Justin McElroy, CBC.
And tell me what the game is you're developing? This might be my last chance to ask you.
I have 7 questions about Ocean Falls.
Good.
You said that UBCM is not about making announcements, but listening of the work that needs to be done over the last year, I guess. Did you hear from municipalities about their anger over these overlapping crises of healthcare shortages and mental health? And did you have a stronger sense or a takeaway from that in the last week?
What I meant in my comments was that the best thing that comes out of the gathering of elected representatives from the 2 orders of government from across the provinces, it is an opportunity to collaborate. It's an opportunity for communities to share best practices, and most importantly, it's important for the province to hear directly from the front line of the 3 orders of governments. Local governments are at home all the time. And we go to Victoria, others go to Ottawa, and we're detached and separated from Prince George. We're detached and separated from Cranbrook. So these are opportunities to hear directly from representatives, and I believe that's extraordinarily valuable. And I've evolved my thinking on that over time from a staff person who used to service this event to someone who's benefited from the hard work of local government staff as well as provincial government staff. So I believe we learned a lot, as we do every time we come together. But in terms of the way you put the question, Justin, anger, I don't believe is what I heard. I heard frustration, despondency, and a lack of hope in some areas. And my job is to hear those concerns. I'm well aware of them, that these problems didn't arrive yesterday and they won't be solved magically tomorrow. They'll only be solved if we roll up our sleeves together and focus on the challenges. Recruitment and retention of healthcare providers in communities is a challenge if those communities don't have other services. I mentioned Fort St. James in my comments, and what motivated us to get the capital project going, and the new hospital in Fort St. James is now underway, is to assist that community in recruiting healthcare workers. Coming to work in a state-of-the-art facility is appealing to someone who may be coming from another part of the country or another part of the world, or someone who's working in an urban center who wants to perhaps have a slower pace and enjoy the extraordinary benefits of living in rural British Columbia, but they're not going to go and work in ATCO trailers. And so the community talked to us, they spoke to us loudly and clearly, not with anger, but with focus on reason as to why that capital project should go forward. And it is going forward, and it will make a transformative difference to the Indigenous nations in that territory, the Nakasley, the Glaston, Binti, as well as Takla, and of course the people who live around Stewart Lake. So I believe that the benefits of UBCM are starting the discussions to lead to solutions, and that's what we did this week, and we're going to start Monday morning to work on those concerns that we heard today.
Follow up?
Yesterday there was a session with leaders from the communities most affected by the record flooding last year. Somebody asked what are some of the immediate steps that can happen now. Mayor Henry Braun said the province could take over responsibility and funding for diking. He said that he heard from you last year that it was a priority, that it could come in the fall session, and he said, I take the Premier at his word. Should he continue to take you at his word in this final session that you have?
Yes, he should. We're working on a strategy with municipalities. I know you will know, because you asked the question, that responsibility for diking was devolved, is the word that was used. Download is the word you would use if you're on the receiving end of the devolution. Downloaded onto municipalities back in 2003. And clearly that was an ill-advised policy change. At the same time, I don't believe the province should have paramountcy over all of our rivers and all of the challenges of managing climate change. We need to do that together. Municipalities don't want to pass off to another order of government the responsibility. They want a partner that will be there with them. And that's the model we're working on. Minister Farnworth and Minister Blair at the federal level, I have to give props to the federal government. When the atmospheric river hit us last fall, they were quick to respond, not just with resources so that we could build back the Coquihalla and the other, the rail beds and other things that were disrupted, but they are here for the long term. And Minister Farnworth's working on that as Minister responsible for emergency preparedness, working with extraordinary leaders like Henry. I'm very sad that he won't be seeking re-election, but again, a demonstration of how people step up to respond to the crisis that's in front of them, and Henry and the people of Abbotsford, and also the Mayor Brown and the people of Merritt. I tell to my colleagues across the country when I get the opportunity, when they talk about the challenges that they have, I speak about Merritt particularly because last year the town was evacuated because of fires and smoke. Many of the people that were evacuated had already been evacuated to Merritt from Lytton. And then the rains came and those same citizens were evacuated again. Unprecedented, and I say that word too often, but I don't know how to describe it. When we see the impacts of climate change so graphically, we need to double down on our efforts to make sure that we are 5 million souls in a sea of 8, coming on 8 billion, are doing everything that we can. But we also need to make sure we're advocating to other jurisdictions through our trade policies, through our engagements in multilateral tables with the federal government, that we're doing everything we can to ensure that the rest of the world is keeping pace with the changes that we're making to meet these extraordinary challenges.
Next question, Dan Fermanagh, Post Media.
Premier, my first question is a personal one. This is your last UBCM as Premier. What specifically do you think you'll miss about these UBCM gatherings in the future? And is there anything you will not miss?
Well, what I'll definitely miss is the post-speech scrum. This is a real opportunity for me to engage in a discussion about the issues of the day, and so I'm happy to do that. Now, what I will miss is the collegiality, quite genuinely. I know, and I don't mean to. People are frustrated in communities. I think anger. I'm always hopeful, and I know the people that I engage with, they do that because they're hopeful. They don't do it because they've got an axe to grind. They have a problem and they need a resolution. And so I've always, when I got into government, not to be flashy, not to look for aggrandizement. I did it because my neighbors needed help. That's how I started, and that's, I think, how I'm going to finish. But throughout UBCMs, as a staff person, as a backbench MLA, as leader of the opposition, and now as Premier, what I've observed and what I have felt deeply, particularly over the past number of years, is how powerful working together can be. And I just can't stress that enough. I know it sounds a bit Pollyanna. I'm not allowed to say Pollyanna. Am I? Is that on the board? I have a board of words I'm not allowed to say, but I guess that board can go out the door. But I will miss the collegiality and the camaraderie. I have a friend, Ken Williams, is the mayor of Highlands, just claimed again for another term. And we kind of made it a deal that every year we'd meet at UBCM and at the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities luncheon and talk about how lucky we are to come from Southern Vancouver Island. And I did that again this year with Ken, and I said next year you're going to have to find another lunch date, but he knows my number, so he'll call me. But I'll miss that. And what won't I miss? It's really hard to say because I'm in, and I don't want to be too maudlin. Can I say maudlin? I think I can. I don't want to be overly reflective, but I am so fortunate to have had this opportunity and to drop in on people's lives. I mean, I did a little bit of a travel log at the end of my speech, but I could have gone on for hours about the extraordinary people I've met. And, you know, it's the office. If you come in and say, hey, I'm the Premier, people want to talk to you. If I'm just John at the coffee shop, they go, yeah, whatever, you know, and they move along. So I am very blessed to have been able to engage and start a conversation with people. And you never know where it's going to go. Sometimes you don't like the outcome. But as I've said, we're an amalgam, we're a collection of all of the things, all of our experiences throughout our lives, and I'll cherish every minute as Premier, even the very, very deep, dark days of the pandemic, the atmospheric river, and also, of course, my personal health journey. All of that, I was able to get through the cancer treatment because I was buried in good wishes from British Columbians and indeed Canadians, and I just can't be more grateful and thankful for the opportunity I've had to do this work.
Follow up, Dan?
And we heard both during UBCM and before, we've heard from cabinet ministers about your government taking action to expedite housing approvals at the local government level. With the legislature sitting next month, how much detail can you share about the timeline of what we should expect and maybe the content of what's going to happen?
Yeah. Well, we have the largest capital budget in BC history, and again, I wish I could recite them all, but I can tell you at least of one engagement I had this week with the City of Port Alberni. And Mayor Minions went through a half a dozen BC housing projects that were started in 2017 or 2018 that are coming to conclusion now. So we have built mountains of housing, unprecedented, more student housing in the past 5 years than had been built in the previous 20. And student housing frees up housing stock in communities for renters. If we're building houses on campus, that means that those students aren't pushing other people out of their housing stock, rental stock in communities. So we've done a lot, and we have just scratched the surface. That's what my takeaway is, and that's what Minister Rankin is charged with doing, continuing to make sure BC Housing is responsive to communities and that we move processes as quickly as possible. And the most important thing that we are doing and need to get going faster on is complex care. There are too many people that are not getting the services they need, and that's leading to street disorder. That's leading to a sense of fear in communities, particularly in urban centers, but not exclusively. And that's the big challenge that I heard over and over again from representatives here. We need to make sure we're not just building affordable housing, we need to make sure we're building appropriate housing for people who need virtually 24-hour care. The closure of Riverview clearly was the wrong policy because it wasn't accompanied with massive investments in community services. We now have to find a way to create a Riverview-style location that also has programs for people in communities, because not everyone requires 24-hour care, but many people require access to healthcare providers. It will also, and I'm sorry to I've given lots of clips here, and I hope you can use some of them. We want to make sure that law enforcement has the services and resources that they need, and that means making sure that there are social workers and other addiction specialists and others that can assist law enforcement in doing the very complex job that they now are faced with, which is not just law and order, but also oftentimes diagnosis and in many cases immediate treatment with respect to overdoses and other issues like that. So we need more people to provide services, and you'll talk to anybody today in the private sector, whether it's hospitality, the restaurants here, the hotels, desperately short of staff. Nurse practitioners, care aides, we don't have enough teachers, we don't have enough childcare workers. Every sector of the economy is being affected by what we all knew was coming, the so-called gray tsunami, which now I am a proud member of. As people retire, they're wanting more services, they're living longer, and there are fewer people to provide those services. That leads to a labor crisis, and that's one of the biggest challenges we have today. Not enough people.
Next question, Fran Yanor, Northern Beat.
Thank you. Hi, Premier.
Hey.
Good speech.
Thanks.
You mentioned in
I've been meandered for a while.
They seemed wrapped.
Oh.
You mentioned in your speech talking about the sort of sometimes toxic discourse that's out there, and then how you deal with it and you have hope. But I've talked to a number of mayors and councillors who have cited it as a major or even the reason that they are not running again. So does this concern you, or what are your thoughts on that?
It concerns me greatly, and it should concern all thoughtful, compassionate citizens of this country. It's not just at the local level or the provincial level, it's at the federal level as well. And I know there's anger. I know there's frustration with many people not getting the services that they need, whether it's in healthcare or housing, education, any number of areas. Businesses who are frustrated that they could expand if they only had access to more workers, not skilled, just workers. So I don't believe, though, that frustration should create a toxic environment for solving these problems. And it's a real issue. And the vast majority of British Columbians are supportive of their elected representatives. I can't count the number of people who told me they didn't vote for me. Lots. But I also know lots of people did. And now it doesn't matter. And what I take away from that is, if I can talk to Conservatives and Liberals and Greens and try and find common ground, then others can too. And those that live on the comment sections and live under anonymous Twitter handles, they're free to do that. But my appeal to regular folks is to meet that hatred with kindness and compassion, meet that venom and toxicity with a collaborative approach. That's a very good suggestion you have of pushing everyone into the sea, but I don't think that's going to work. Why don't we try something else? I mean, I'm being a bit glib, but that's, I guess, my defense mechanism against this. One example that I share with people, and I'll share with the cameras, on Family Day a few years ago, we posted a picture of my wife Ellie and I and our two boys in a hammock on a summer holiday. You know, innocent picture, two kids, man and wife, trees in the background, smiles on their faces, summer day. What's to be toxic about? And my son received a copy of this from one of his buddies saying, "Nice haircut, dude," because he had a buzz cut, and so he laughed at that and smiled, and the first comment he could see on his Insta feed was a positive one. And I told him, do not read the comment section. But he was enticed because it was a fond memory for him. And he started, and within 2 or 3 posts, the venom started, completely unrelated to anything other than, oh, here's an opportunity to say to John Horgan and anyone who's associated with him that I hate you and everything about you. Doesn't help anyone, doesn't advance any cause, it just creates a sense of I don't want anything to do with that. And when I hear of elected representatives who are saying, I'm not doing this anymore because of this venom from anonymous people, it makes me very, very sad. I'm not leaving for that reason. I would prefer to stay and combat that with a big smile. Dave Barrett's spouse, I'm glad to be able to talk about Dave Barrett so much. He was very important to me. I didn't get a chance to ask him because he was in advanced stages of dementia when I became leader, but I asked his wife Shirley if she could give me any advice. And she looked around to make sure no one was listening, and she said, Dave would have said, keep smiling at the bastards, Horgan, because it'll drive them crazy. And so that's what I've tried to do. When someone's screaming and spitting at me about something that I have no connection to, I just try and smile at them and hope that they will calm down and find a hobby or find a better way to channel their anger. And for those who are leaving because of that contempt, I hope they'll reflect instead on the countless number of people who are just getting on with their lives and saying, I'm glad you're doing that because someone has to, whether it's being a school board trustee, a city councillor, or an MLA.
Fran, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Somewhat related. The number, again, mayors and councils have talked off the record because I don't want to speak about it, but they're concerned about some of the candidates parachuting in. Some have ties to more of the extreme elements that we've seen recently, and they're quite worried.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and so what's your response on that?
Well, thankfully, we live in a free society, and people can put their hand up and say, vote for me, but I am absolutely confident that the majority of people, whether they're voting in a local election, whether they're voting in a provincial election, or in a federal election, are more thoughtful than the anonymous voices on Twitter. And the advantage, and I guess I can say whatever the heck I want, can't I? The guy, I can't even know, the People's Party. A lot of noise, a lot of attention, a lot of cameras, 6% of the vote. And why I'm a proponent of proportional representation is because it allows us to say there are the people who are hateful and their number is small. If you don't put a label on them, if you don't put them on a ballot, they can pretend to be a majority, but they are not. And when they put their hand up and say, vote for us, we're angry at everything, and they get annihilated, that gives me hope that communities and people are more focused on positive outcomes, not just being angry.
Next question, Shannon Waters. Capitol Daily.
Hi, Premier. Back in March, yourself and Washington State Governor Jay Inslee announced a plan to develop a transboundary initiative in an effort to prevent future Nooksack River floods. At the time, it was said that details on it would be released in the spring. The Americans have indicated they're not considering building a dike to prevent a future flood toward Canada from that river. I'm wondering what you have done, if anything, to change their mind on that front, and when British Columbians might expect an update on that initiative.
Well, my colleague Rick Glumac is my designate to liaise with Washington State, not just on Nooksack, but other transboundary issues. I participated in the Cascadia Corridor Conference with governors from Washington, Oregon, and California just this week. We have a range of issues that we need to collaborate on. We have economic, social, and cultural connections from the Alaska Panhandle down to Baja. And as West Coasters, we have to collaborate on those areas where our bioregion intersects, and Governor Inslee is well aware of that. The challenges around Nooksack, it's almost like you put a barrier here, it'll create a problem somewhere else. And that's why Minister Farnworth, my colleague Rick Glumac, MLA, as well as representatives from Emergency Management BC, local government, and Washington State officials, Indigenous peoples on both sides of the border, are working on a solution. But to say let's just dike the Nooksack here to prevent water from overflowing into Sumas Prairie at extraordinary high water times will have knock-on effects down the road. And we have had collaboration on rivers, whether it be the Skagit, which is a transboundary river, the Columbia, which is a whole treaty is built around. So I'm confident that we'll find a way forward with respect to Nooksack. I'll miss Henry Braun's leadership from Abbotsford, but I know his council and whoever replaces him will have the same focus, which is to protect the territory that they're responsible for, but in a way that does not have knock-on effects in Washington State. And will there be a requirement for collaboration and dollars being spent south of the border by us and dollars potentially being spent by Americans above the border? That's entirely possible. But those are, as everyone would imagine, very complex discussions. But the fact that we're at a table, the fact that we've had a historic event that we can focus on to prevent in the future, I think is a cause for optimism.
Follow up, Shannon?
Yes, different topic. We got another update this week, as we do every month, on the number of British Columbians who have died due to the toxic drug supply. It's been over 5 years now since you introduced a standalone ministry to tackle the issue and build the continuum of care needed to respond to the crisis. That continuum is still in the works per the current minister. And I'm wondering if you can reflect a bit on where we are 5 years after you set that ministry up and what you hope will change in the years to come.
Well, thank you for the question. And it has been, it was our mission and purpose to ensure that there was someone at the cabinet table that was getting up every day seeking solutions to the challenges of a toxic drug supply. That toxic drug supply was made worse by the pandemic and the closing of borders, because now we have burgeoning fentanyl underground industry within British Columbia that is perhaps more toxic than the supply that was coming offshore prior to 2017 or prior to the pandemic. But again, what I heard from communities, not just today, but have for the past 5 years, is that this is a vexing challenge that is costing us the lives of our brothers and sisters, our neighbors and our friends, and we need to redouble our efforts. We have more than ever elevated the ability of first responders to have the tools they need, but there's more work that needs to be done. And in one area that I'm particularly interested in, and I talked about in an earlier question, is making sure that we're trying to find that solution between institutionalization and just allowing people who clearly need mental intervention to just be rambling around in our communities. We need to balance civil liberties. We need to balance delivery of health care. And we need to balance the importance of protecting people's lives. And addictions are debilitating. I had a nicotine addiction years ago, and it was one of the most difficult things that I ever experienced. I can't imagine having to break an opioid addiction that wasn't brought upon by personal choice. It could have been through the number of people who are prescribed opioids for pain remediation as a result of an industrial accident, or even just showing up at their doctor's or an acute care facility is profound. And so having a better understanding from a policy perspective on the magnitude of the problem is one thing, but the numbers continue to tell us a tragic story about human beings, not just a toting up at the end of every month, but a reflection on families that are losing loved ones because we can't crack this nut. And we have done a lot on harm reduction. We've worked with the federal government to decriminalize simple possession. Harm reduction strategies in British Columbia are well advanced on other jurisdictions, but it's a four-pillar approach. It's not just about harm reduction. It's about ensuring that there's housing and ensuring that there are supports outside of harm reduction, and also enforcement. There are criminal elements at play here, and I don't want people to assume that if simple possession is not a crime, preying on people is a crime. And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to be sure that the public understands that there are a multitude of approaches at play here. Clearly, not all of them are working effectively, and we continue to manage and monitor that on a daily basis. And we can do that because we have a minister responsible. I will also say imitation is the highest form of flattery. Every other jurisdiction in the country now has a minister of mental health and addictions because we need to make sure we're doing this every day, not just at the end of the week.
We have time for a couple more questions in the room. Ben Milger, CTV Vancouver.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No worry. Hey, Premier. Mayors across the province have been very vocal about their concerns over public safety, repeat offenders, hurting local businesses, hurting tourism, hurting the reputation of a lot of these nice places we have here in BC. Do you feel like you've done enough to tackle those issues?
Well, we have a report we've just received from Doug Lepard, from former law enforcement, as well as Dr. Butler, an academic in this area. We're going to review that material and see where we go. We do know because I say it's the Urban Mayors Caucus, which is all of our cities, over 80,000 people come together to speak about how they can use best practices in their communities, how they can work with us on law enforcement, on complex care, complex housing, and so we continue to do that. And the frustration, I absolutely hear it, and I understand it because I live in a fast-growing area in southern Vancouver Island, and safety is a primary concern for many people. But I want to also say that Seattle's experiencing this, Portland, San Francisco, San Diego, and communities right across the country. And the challenge for all policymakers is trying to find the way to respect civil liberties, respect the rule of law, ensure that people have access to defense if they're charged with anything. But this notion that there's a deliberate policy to release people that are a harm to the community is I think, a bit of a fabrication, and we need to make sure we're giving comfort to people that when there are criminal elements in the community that are clearly putting other people at risk, that we're taking steps in a civil society to protect other people from having their rights intruded upon. That's a delicate balance, and that governments of all stripes are challenged by that every day. But I'm confident that we have the right people in place, and the report that we're about to receive will give us a bit more direction, and we'll hopefully be able to get that complex care housing going, ensuring that that the people who do need to be in care are getting the care they need.
Follow-up?
Yeah, just quickly. In regards to Monday's holiday, is your government hearing from concerned parents who are now, I guess, scrambling to get childcare with schools being out? Yeah,
we're hearing that, of course, and I very much regret that a time that should have been for solemn reflection on the 70 years of service by Queen Elizabeth to the people of Canada and to the Commonwealth was complicated by a decision the federal government made without significant consultation with provinces. There's a patchwork across the country of holidays as a result of that. We have collective agreements in place in British Columbia that go back for 4 or 5 cycles of bargaining. So these so-called Me Too clauses have been in place for some time. And whenever in the clauses in many collective agreements, but not the BC Teachers Federation, I want to be clear on that, but many other public sector unions have these clauses, and they contain a clause that says that the federal government mandates a holiday, that holiday is in effect here. So we were put into a bit of a dilemma. I understand the challenges for parents. I very much hope that we can get through Monday as best as we all can, but it really does, quite frankly, diminish from what should have been an opportunity for all of us to spend a few moments reflecting on the extraordinary life of Queen Elizabeth. And rather, we have people frustrated because they have domestic issues they have to deal with. So I regret that, but it came on us quickly, and other provinces are feeling the same challenges and have responded differently, of course, but we've taken the course we are, and I'm hopeful that Tuesday will come, and we'll go on from there. Monday will happen, Tuesday will follow.
Last question in the room, Jeremy Hainsworth, Glacier Media.
Great shirt, man. Can you guys pan over there?
I'm here
What
to
do
be
you
of
do? Can you do a
service.
walk by? Can you do a walk?
One of my journalism instructors told me always to ruin the clips.
Oh, well, that would be perfect.
As a print guy.
I'm good with that. I've
been put up to this. Marcella Bernardo is sick, so I'm here to ask her annual question.
Uh-huh.
What's going on with daylight savings time?
Yeah, thank you, Marcella. It has been something that I was late to the party on, but quick to respond to, save and except for the fact that other jurisdictions haven't followed suit. You will know, those who follow this issue, we passed legislation in British Columbia to end the changing of clocks every fall and every spring, and of course we're falling back and springing forward, just so everyone remembers that. We had hoped that Washington, Oregon, and California would follow suit. Washington has put in place the appropriate legislative tools, as has Oregon. California, who started this, quite frankly, have been slow to the party. The federal government in the United States is responsible for these determinations, and there was a breakthrough last year when the Senate actually passed something, and that was allowing jurisdictions to go this direction. So I don't want to spoil any surprise for Marcella particularly, but also for British Columbians by commenting today. We'll be in the legislature next month, and we'll have more to say at that time.
Do you have a follow-up, Jeremy?
No, I think I'm done on that one.
Walk by, man. Come on, do it for me. Do it for me.
Okay, it's sure for good luck.
Thank you.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.